As a private citizen, as someone who knows the justice system, I see it proceeding incredibly quickly and very, very professionally. The most important indication of that is you don't know anything about it except when he files something in court, and that's the way it should be.
Former FBI Director Jim Comey up on Capitol Hill testifying behind closed doors. That transcript coming out tomorrow. He's also coming back to Capitol Hill for a second bite at the apple in a couple weeks. But he's talking there about the Mueller probe, and we get these filings tonight that we've been digesting here live on air. But we have a panel now. Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent of the Washington Examiner. Molly Hemingway, Senior Editor at The Federalist. David Campney, Senior Politics Writer for U.S. News and World Report. And we welcome back George Washington University Law Professor Jonathan Turley. Okay, Byron, Molly, David, you've had time to read through. Byron, you first.
Well, I think with the case of Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort, you've always had to divide the actual personal crimes they committed in their own businesses versus the things that were related to Donald Trump. So taxi medallions, tax evasion, all of that stuff that Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to, and that's the stuff that's going to get him the real jail time, remember. You can kind of separate that. And likewise with Manafort, some of the Ukraine dealings, all of his shady businesses, buying 1 million suits and all of that stuff, you can separate that. So the question is, what new does this tell us about Trump? And as far as Michael Cohen is concerned, it doesn't tell us a lot more new, I think. The campaign contributions, the issue of paying off Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, and prosecutors characterizing that payoff
as at the direction of?
Yes, as the direction of the president, or at that time the candidate, characterizing that as an illegal contribution. That could be troublesome for the president. I don't think there's a lot new on that. And also we heard that maybe Cohen had some contacts that we did not know about. As far as Manafort is concerned, you have more contacts with the administration. But most of what they're angry at Manafort about is he's still lying about his business in Ukraine. So I'm not sure that really changes the dynamic of the Trump-Russia scandal.
Molly.
I think the reason why this is important, too, is that we were sold the special counsel as an investigation into treasonous collusion with Russia to steal the election. And when you go through these, and I've done a cursory review, I would like to go through it again, we're not seeing treasonous collusion with Russia, nor anything close to it. And that's important because this is a wide-ranging special counsel that has found all sorts of things, gotten people to make plea agreements, or, now we're at the sentencing stage for people. And this is something that even the people who set up this special counsel are now admitting that it was set up not because they thought there was treasonous collusion with Russia to steal an election. We actually know from their own texts that at the time they set up the special counsel that they knew that there was not evidence of that, but in their words, to rein in the president and to constrain him. This is a very high price to pay for Donald Trump winning the election, and it's very important that people care about rule of law. Not that you can't find things that people have done that are crimes, but that there is an important issue here about the federal government, how it runs, and whether it's okay to win an election, even if it makes certain people very angry.
There is, as we referenced earlier, that part about Russia, David, in the special counsel filing, where he talks about how Cohen cooperated on the Russia-related matters. It seems to me sort of like coming attraction, not a...
Yeah, I mean, there's also a divide on how much Cohen cooperated. It seemed like the Southern District Court wants to send him away. Mueller seemed to say, oh, he's playing ball with us. Let's be a little more lenient. To me, the top line of this whole thing, all these documents, is one thing. It's that the Southern District Court of New York says the President of the United States engaged in a criminal conspiracy to violate campaign finance laws through those 2 payments. Forget the collusion. I don't think... Well, this stack of papers does not prove the collusion, but just read it. Individual 1 is cited in this document 24 times, and it says Individual 1 directed a criminal conspiracy with his attorney to violate campaign finance, basically saying the President of the United States committed a felony.
Right, at the direction of, and that's the part that really captured everybody's attention. Molly.
And I know I might be disagreeing, which I never want to do, with Professor Turley here, but I think it's not an open and shut case. This is a very interesting section of the sentencing memo, and it is extremely overwritten. It is very dramatic. I don't think it's settled whether this would be a campaign election violation. And in order to make that case, you should live your life in such a way that nobody ever tries to get you to pay money for silence. You should live your life that way, and I don't think that Donald Trump has lived his life that way. But in order to make this case, they basically are going to have to prove that Donald Trump has literally never paid anyone for their silence. That is something I might not be willing to risk.
But in the background, obviously, of all of that is the election that is ongoing. And you mentioned the writing there. Here it is. This is full screen memo number 2. Cohen's commission of 2 campaign finance crimes on the eve of the 2016 election for President of the United States struck a blow to one of the core goals of the federal campaign finance laws, transparency. While many Americans who desired a particular outcome to the election knocked on doors, toiled at phone banks, or found any number of other legal ways to make their voices heard, Cohen sought to influence the election from the shadows. He did so by orchestrating secret and illegal payments to silence 2 women who otherwise would have made public their alleged extramarital affairs with individual one, Donald Trump. In the process, Cohen deceived the voting public by hiding alleged facts that he believed would have had a substantial effect on the election. It is this type of harm that Congress sought to prevent when it imposed limits on individual contributions to candidates. Jonathan.
Well, first of all, Molly's point is a good one. You still have to prove the crime. What's different here is that previously it was Michael Cohen that was alluding to Donald Trump's involvement. This is the special counsel saying it in a filing and saying that it views this account to be, quote, credible, if you look at both these filings together. That is serious. Now, it's not that the federal election crime itself is as serious. In some ways, obstruction is a type of parasitic crime. It lives off another crime. So if the special counsel is saying, look, there was this crime here on the federal election laws, and then there was an effort to obstruct efforts to reveal that crime, then the obstruction crime could become actually more serious than the original crime. That's the problem for the Trump administration, because courts will find that a very credible argument. Now, at the end of the day, I think there's still good arguments he could make that I was doing this as a husband. I was trying to basically silence people that I allegedly had affairs with. But when you have that obstruction allegation that is clearly being sort of laid out here, it gets more serious.
But you know, that last line, Byron, where he's talking about Congress, it kind of serves up on a silver platter to House Democrats to determine whether that's high crimes and misdemeanor and start an impeachment process.
And that's what they're going to do. To make what Molly said a little simpler, I think Trump's biggest defense in the payoff case is, I've been paying off women for years. I didn't do it when I didn't start doing it when I ran for president. But clearly, you're right. This is teed up for Democrats to make this about campaign violations. And something Dave said very, very quickly. He said, "Forget the collusion. This stuff is really important." Now that's going to be a very interesting thing to see if Democrats actually try to make that pivot. Yeah, forget the collusion. Let's talk about campaign finance. We've been talking for 2 years about how this is Trump and Russia conspiring to fix the election.
Molly.
And that is, I think, such an important issue. The trust of the American people in our law enforcement agencies, and whether they can handle when someone who they don't like is elected president, and whether that person has the right to run his administration, or whether anyone who helped that person will have their entire life gone through. That is something that can be very damaging to the health of the republic. And so I hope people of all stripes care about that issue as well.
And you know, David, this is really interesting, and we got to do it quickly, but the decision that House Democrats will have when likely Speaker Pelosi takes the gavel, when presented with all of this, will be monumental politically as you look forward to 2020.
Absolutely, because we're about to start a presidential race, and you're going to have senators announcing and them having to decide, should we go forward with impeachment proceedings? We know how that ended up for Republicans after they did it to Bill Clinton. They got backlash, but I think you will see some Democrats saying this is the rule of law. And even though this investigation started about collusion, Jonathan can tell us, but it happens all the time. You open an investigation, it leads you down a different rabbit hole, and this rabbit hole may be campaign finance, a violation, and not collusion.
It's amazing. Panel, thank you so much. Jonathan, thanks for sticking around. This show's pretty interesting. When we come back, notable quotables.